Hi everyone, welcome to the IOP's Limitless Introduction webinar. Just waiting on a few more joiners. So whilst we're waiting, stick in the chat who you are, where you're from, a bit like blind date, who you are, where you're from, and one thing that's going well right now for you. Hi Hugh, I'm going to unmute you for you to ask a question, okay? Go for it. Oh. So for those of you who are just joining, we're going to start off in a couple of minutes, but what we're doing right now is just welcoming everyone to the webinar, and we're putting something in the chat about who you are, where you're from, and one thing that's going well for you. Hi Pierre, good to know that it's not raining in Manchester, which is always nice to know, and great to have Paul Johnson as well from Yorkshire. Hi Diane. Oh, we got some old friends, not friends that are old friends, and some new people that I've not come across yet. Great to see you, Ian, and you, Angelina. Yeah, welcome, Phil. Hi, Hugh.
It's nice to hear, Phil.
Yeah.
It's a small wins.
Is it a left thumb or a right thumb? So we're just going to wait 1 more minute, and then I'll just do some introductions. Oh, those mushrooms get terrible. There's probably some joke in there about, hopefully it wasn't a serious mushroom, and he was a fun guy, but it's all right. I'll delete that one out of the recording. So what we're going to do, allow me to introduce sort of myself, I suppose. I'm Paul Williams, the Member Networks Manager at the IOP, and this session is just one of many that we hope to put on for over the next, well, however long, around Limitless, and next one's going to be around data protection in July, and then possibly some more around Limitless and other ways of engaging with the campaign. With me tonight is Mikey Jarrell, who is the Public Engagement Manager in Scotland, and he's also the team leader for all our work around the Limitless campaign with our work with families and carers. Now, Mikey's going to go into the whole background of the campaign and the whys and the whats and the whos and what have you. But this session is hopefully going to give an overview of the campaign itself, especially maybe from a family and carer point of view, as our sort of target audience. And we'll also share with you how you might want to get involved or opportunities of how you might want to get involved if you, well, of course, if you want to. And I say that with that line of course you want to get involved, because there is an element of professional registration in here, of how we want to commit to that professional recognition, and how this might contribute to CPD and how it might contribute to chartership, etc. What we're going to do when Mikey starts his presentation is everyone's muted and cameras off at the moment. If you've got any questions, please write them in the Q&A box, which is on the top, and we'll get to them at the end. It just saves Mikey being distracted from the chat going bonkers halfway through the session. And then what we're going to do, and then at the end of the presentation, we'll open up for a chat and a discussion rather than just us presenting to you, and that will make a bit more of an engagement session, really. So less from me and more from Mikey, and I'll see you on the other side.
Thanks, Paul. Hopefully everyone can hear me okay. You have to say that sort of thing. I didn't put in the chat what's going well for me today, but what's going really well is the fact that this webinar is so well attended. I think it's amazing for so many people to come out and want to support the campaign. So thank you so much for giving up your time in the evening to come along and talk to us, because as Paul said, we do want this to be a discussion rather than a presentation. There is a little presentation bit at the start, and then we'd like to hear from you about the kinds of things you're already doing, whether you think you would like to support the campaign by doing the kind of things that we're talking about here with families, parents and carers specifically. So we're a year and a half-ish into the campaign being live and active. I hope a lot of you have heard about the campaign and its purpose and its aims already. For those of you members who might be new or haven't yet engaged with the campaign, I'm going to do a very short headline bit about what the campaign is and what we're trying to achieve, and then we're going to talk about specifically the section of the campaign that I'm responsible for, which is influencing the parents and carers of young people that are currently underrepresented in physics. So without further ado, we'll launch in. As I just said, Limitless. And by the way, these slides, this is on a live presenting format on Teams. So at any point you can navigate around the slides yourself, I believe, on a webinar format. And other people won't see it. So if you miss something on a slide, you want to go back and check, you can actually flick around your own view and then return to what's called the live view at any time. So just to let you know, you can do that, but I'll move on, obviously, as I speak. So the Limitless campaign is the campaign to support I Hate Reading slides word for word. And I'm sorry, Andy's just said he can't hear anything. Can I just check that others can hear before we carry on? It might be his sound output at his end rather than the input at my end. Was that a thumbs up? Looks like. Lovely. So Andy might, actually, there's no point saying to recommend Andy why he can't hear, because he can't hear me. But Paul, would you be able to potentially just put in the chat? Thank you. So the campaign is designed to support young people to change the world, to fulfill their potential by doing physics. I'm reading word for word because that is the headline of the campaign. The aim of the campaign is that young people from more specific diverse backgrounds take physics post 16. And by that we mean any pathway that involves physics at A level or higher, or and then beyond that into any route, whether industry, technical or academia, research, you name it. Physics post 16 is where this specific set of 5 underrepresented characteristics are just not there in physics currently. Physics has this unique problem, even from the other sciences who don't have the same underrepresented groups. And the research that the IOP undertook before launching the campaign identified that this is the problem. Why does it matter? Well, that's because there's strong evidence, really years old and established evidence that lack of diversity is incredibly limiting for disciplines. Diversity in terms of the direction physics takes, the different voices, the different viewpoints, the different lived experience amongst people doing physics means that we get worse physics. So the campaign is essentially set out there to remove the barriers that these young people face from these specific underrepresented backgrounds so that they're no longer limited, hence the name of the campaign. These barriers are imposed from, that's great, thank you, you can hear me, welcome Andy. So these barriers have been in place, we're working as the IOP to dismantle them. Lots of the barriers are involved in young people's surroundings and their context, the people that influence them in their lives and the institutions that influence them in their lives are creating some of these barriers. So the campaign, rather than going out to young people and saying, in these underrepresented groups and saying, physics is for you, physics can help you change the world, whoever you are, regardless of your background, we are trying to change the structures and institutions around these young people so that they themselves pass on the messages to the young people. So we're influencing the influences of young people. And those of you familiar with the campaign will have heard this over and over again. What it means is that, as I just said, we're working specifically with this set of influencers of young people that we've identified as being those that have most impact and sway in young people's attitudes to subjects, career choices, and feelings really towards physics. Parents and carers, and that's what we're going to talk about specifically today. But then also the other influencers, of which there are other teams within the campaign working to influence them. And I'm very happy to answer questions as far as I can on these as well. The communities around the young people, so that could be extracurricular groups, it could be sports, it could be all kinds of things that aren't specifically their parents and carers, their teachers, nursery staff and educators, policymakers, the media and social media. So as I said, we're going to be focusing today on families, but there are teams within the campaign working to get a specific set of messages to all of these influences. The messages are broadly the same, but they're tweaked slightly depending on which of the influences we're dealing with. What we are aiming to do with parents and carers is to essentially get the parents and carers of young people from these underrepresented groups to hear the campaign messages. That could be through a large number of means, but we are focusing as the IOP staff team and within the campaign, which is essentially the IOP's public engagement team. So we're now focusing the majority, but not all of our public engagement on this programme, is that we're running events for families and putting out resources for families to use at home, which contain the campaign messages. And we are delivering these events and activities with the parents and carers of the underrepresented groups specifically, as far as possible. And we're sending the resource packs to the parents and carers of underrepresented groups so that they can use them at home. And we are doing that through our 2 summer exhibitions. So those of you familiar with the IOP's summer exhibitions, they run during the summer holidays in the Caledonian Road building. And they now are campaign vehicles in that they are more targeted towards the right family audiences that we need to reach for the campaign, and they contain the campaign messages. I'll get to the campaign messages shortly because I'm sure you're wondering what they are if you're not aware. The summer exhibition this year for the first time will be also happening in Dublin in person, and the summer exhibition is an exhibition but it's also a series of workshops. It's a take-home resource. It's got this whole package of activities that families can do based around this theme, and the theme is about useful physics, which is changing the world, and it contains diverse physicists and the campaign messages woven through the content. We'll be running it in Dublin for the first time this year, which is really exciting. Was intended to be in the IOP's new building in Dublin, but due to some issues there with the facilities, the opening of the building to the public is slower than we'd anticipated. So we're running it in Dublin in a community space, but as with Caledonian Road, it's going to run for the extent of the summer holidays and with underrepresented groups. So that's super exciting. So 2 summer exhibitions this year. The Real Physics workshops, which is all about Instagram and TikTok Reels, where we work with family groups to create reels about the physics and the campaign messages. And then we're also going out in the nations and regions to community events such as Highland Games, which I did last weekend up here in Scotland, the Eisteddfod in Wales, and the National Ploughing Championships in Ireland. So that's going out to non-science events with our campaign messages and activities. So what we're asking of the membership, and not just the membership, but anybody working or doing engagement with, did I spell Eisteddfod wrong? I'm sorry, are you just excited? I did, I'm sorry, there's an R in there. Is that we are asking our ambassadors to join the campaign and run events like this with us and for us, in conjunction with us, but also go out on your own and do them either in addition to or instead of any public engagement or outreach activities that you're already doing. The messages that we're trying to get out there, and we can kind of sum up here, and these are the specific campaign messages for parents and carers. They look slightly different for policymakers, educators, etc. I won't read them word for word, but I will make these slides available because there are links on there to some resources as well. So we'll send these out afterwards. But it's about, as I said, during our engagement activities and in our resources, we're weaving through it this narrative, as well as the physics, that physics helps young people, gives them opportunities, helps them to make a change in society if they're perhaps motivated to, whether it's climate change or any of the other challenges the world's facing, but they don't really know what they can do in their careers, and they might not have associated physics with useful world-changing careers. And that there are other careers that doing physics post 16 can lead to that aren't necessarily even in physics, because there's lots of transferable skills, and there's a lot of evidence for that. And specifically, we're trying to tell parents and carers that if they can overcome their negative experiences, stereotypes of physics, then they're removing limits to their young people and giving them more opportunities. So they're positive messages. They're really emotive. There's a call to action for parents and carers, and it helps them encourage their young people to do better. So what we're asking, as I said, is for people to join us and to help us run campaign events with parents and carers around the UK and Ireland for the duration of the campaign. It's already happening, which is amazing. There's been campaign events with families run by the Manchester Committee last month, which is amazing, with connection and help from the IOP staff team, but really off their own back. There's upcoming events in Scotland, which are looking positive as well. So it's already happening. It is a cultural change in terms of what public engagement looks like. And that's a cultural change that we have been navigating as the staff team, and we've been adapting and changing our methods into this influencing parents and carers with campaign messages format. Because it is different, it's not going to happen straight away. And so what we've done is produced, as well as holding a series of these webinars. So we ran a few of these last year, specifically around the launch of a resource, which is the Family Events Designed for Impact Toolkit. And I'll just skip ahead in the slides to just show you that. Booklet is available in hard copy. If you let us know, we can send one out. And also online, and there's a link in the slides at the end. This is a really detailed guide of what we think the differences are between these campaign events and what we were doing previously. It is a full booklet. It's 12 odd pages, and we're running these webinars to kind of create a more accessible bite-size explanation of what's in it, and also because we want to hear about what you're doing and feed that back in. So that's the long read, which is available afterwards. I hope some of you have read it already. It's been out for just a year or so, and as I said, we are now starting to see member-led events that have been designed using this toolkit document. So there's the campaign messages. I won't talk for much longer, but what I will do is anticipate what using some of the questions that came up in the earlier set of webinars last year. We've given a bit of thought to, what you might be doing already with your audiences, if you're here. So presumably you're keen to support the campaign and have a crack at some of this. And so how to do it, really, we can sum up through this model. So the three things that are essential for it to be a Limitless campaign family event is that there must be parents and carers present. So that rules out things like schools, visits to schools, and I really need to stress that when I'm going through this list of what things have to be a campaign event. That doesn't mean that other formats of public engagement aren't valid. They absolutely are, and they will have a lot of positive impact. But I'm talking very specifically about how events and activities can support this branch of this particular campaign. So parents and carers need to be in the room and actively involved, and there's a lot of this in the toolkit already, if you want to sort of dig a bit deeper into it. Secondly, the parents and carers need to be the parents and carers of young people in the underrepresented groups that we're talking about, and those specific underrepresented groups, because they're the ones who aren't doing physics. There are other groups who are perhaps not as obvious or present in society, but they are not as underrepresented in physics as these others. So that, as far as the Limitless campaign goes, the specific underrepresented groups, some of them are very large, women and girls, and some of them are smaller, but they're all out there. And the toolkit will give you some ideas around how to go out to where they are and work with them. And the third thing that needs to be of three in there is that the campaign messages have to be in the content of what you're doing, as well as the physics. The physics is obviously the link to the campaign messages, and if you are presenting physics as exciting and accessible, then that's half the job done. But the campaign message is very specifically around how physics can be useful and used in the real world, rather than just demonstrating a principle, is what really gets parents and carers thinking about and changing their attitudes. So the first two there are about the audience, and the third one there is about the content. So it's not hugely complicated. That doesn't mean it's easy. We've found it challenging to rethink how we work in order to get these three things in, because with any two or one of these three things, it's not having the impact we need it to have for the campaign. So we're not counting it towards the campaign, towards our targets with the campaign. What we want is to mobilize members, non-members, STEM ambassadors across the whole UK and Ireland to start working on this, and to run events that have these three elements to them, and become part of what's essentially a movement. The campaign messages bit, the content, the format can really be whatever you want, but the toolkit document lays out some guidance for the sorts of formats that will enable you to get the campaign messages in there alongside your physics, and also to get parents and carers actively involved, so you're not just running it for young people. And then the people means not the audience, because that's the section above, but you. So it's who comes to lead the activities. Are you talking about yourselves as well as the physics? Are you presenting yourself as a human being, rather than just somebody that's demonstrating physics and talking about what motivates you, perhaps your journey to get there? If you are from one of the underrepresented groups, even better. If you have volunteers in your networks that can actually show visibility, then that's fantastic. So the people and the format, that's flexible. There are things that will work better and will work less well, and that will change depending on you and your context in your regions with your communities. But the blue ones are the essentials, and that's what we will be looking at in terms of, and that's what we're looking at with our work as well, in terms of what counts and what doesn't. So, you know, we've been trying to run activities and events as the staff team for the last couple of years, and we would get it wrong, and we would go, actually, we haven't had enough people from the underrepresented groups at this event, or there wasn't enough for parents in there and they weren't engaged. So we've sort of said, well, that wasn't really impactful, neither was that. So we've slowly worked around a way of getting this right, or as right, and it's obviously ongoing and we're still making mistakes. That's why we are here to help, essentially, and we're running webinars like this, and we're available on the end of an email or the phone to share what we've learned in the last couple of years, and to help other people do this on our behalf, because we can't do it ourselves. You know, we just don't have the resources to have the impact this campaign needs as the staff team alone. So the IOP as a whole, we invite you to get behind it. Some examples, some questions we've had from previous webinars and in conversations around the UK and Ireland with our members and other volunteers are around, are my events I'm already running campaign events? So I prepared a few examples of how things which are currently being done by all sorts of people, STEM ambassadors, the staff team, everybody, you know, how they can be changed to become campaign events if you want to, or if you want to change some of them and not others. A workshop in a school, for example, that's what, you know, a lot of public engagement takes place in schools. Doesn't involve parents and carers unless you run it outside of school hours, at a weekend, in the summer holidays, in the school, for example, using it as a venue. There's lots of ways that that cross can be removed to make a workshop in the school into a limitless family event. Invite the families. A family workshop in an urban mosque. So sort of specifically people of Muslim faith and not one of the underrepresented groups. So you could, if you do have links with those communities, it would be about going and maybe making, and this is something we've done, or we will do actually, at Sharon's on the call. We worked with a Black Caribbean community group in Coventry, and yeah, there's a community centre there, you know, that you can sort of partner with. So getting the right underrepresented groups. Family workshop, great. Parents and carers, great. And the campaign messages in there, great. A workshop at a disabled family centre demonstrating magnetism, brilliant. Underrepresented groups, that's perfect. Parents and carers in there too. Campaign messages, maybe, and that's up to you, and that's up to how you adapt demonstrating magnet. And this is something that we've had a lot of events that have had our traditional public engagement events that I run, for example, the festival that we run up here in Scotland, has been to help demonstrators to weave in the uses of the physics, not just the physics itself, to show that it's being used by real people out there to change the world, rather than just the physics itself. So the campaign messages there could be in there depending on that bit, the uses of the physics and the people. The people that come. It's not quite enough just to have diverse physicists turn up and do it, though that helps. The messages really need to be in there too, and it's not that difficult to do. We found, to leap from the physics to talking about how physics is important. So the toolkit really just lays out a process, which is find your audience, parents, underrepresented groups, decide on a physics theme that ideally is based on your own interests, because then you can talk about yourself and you can show enthusiasm. How does it matter in the real world? And how does it link to campaign messages? I invite you to read this, or at least skim it and get what you need out of it. Like I said, if you get in touch with us, we can send you hard copies. If you work with anybody in the world of physics who you think it has the appetite to get involved in this section of the campaign and would benefit from this resource, we can send you out large quantities to put in, say, a staff room in a physics department, to hand to a physics society. We're doing all this ourselves, but the more of our members out there that are championing this with people who have who want to work with families, this resource is for you. It's not for families themselves, it's for people who want to work with families and do campaign events. Last but not least, the Family Events Toolkit is there, and we'll send these slides out. That's the digital copy. The Superheroes Unlimited Activity Book is last year's summer exhibition, the resource pack that goes along with it, which we'll continue to use until this summer. And there are hard copies of that out there that we can send. So we used the Superheroes Unlimited activities at the Highland Games last week in Helensburgh, which was lovely, and we had one member of the Scotland committee, 2 other members come along, and then another volunteer who wasn't an IOP member, and we used these activities from the activity book, and they naturally are designed to let the conversation flow onto the campaign messages. So we were doing that with families in a rural area that has a lot of rural deprivation last weekend. So that's an example of where you could use these activity packs. And they're all sort of hands-on activities that everyone can get involved with, including the parents. And then lastly, we need to hear about it, because if you're doing campaign events and you're supporting the campaign and having an impact on the parents of these underrepresented young people, the point is the campaign is that we compile all this impact together, and then we can share what we've achieved. And so this last link here is to the public event tracker form. So if you do end up running events like this, tell us about it. Fill in this form, and it will go into our database, and we'll probably get in touch afterwards to say thank you, because like I said, it's a slow burn, and we'll want to celebrate it and celebrate success. There were probably other links on there I should have put on, but if I think of any, I'll pop them in the chat. Herein ends my bit of talking. Paul and I would now really just like to hear, firstly, questions, and I hope that some of you have been putting those in the Q&A section. I can't see those yet. And also, we'd just like to hear about the sorts of things that are being done already around the UK and Ireland, and if you have a will to either do campaign events as well, or to adapt to what you're doing into campaign events, then let's talk about it now for the benefit of everyone on the call. All right, over to you, Paul.
So fair play. The Q&A isn't working for Ian, so let's just put the questions in the chat. Apologies for that. Don't know why, the nuances of Teams. What I'll do, if you want to ask a verbal question, stick your hand up and I'll unmute I'm going to unmute everyone, or give everyone the opportunity to unmute themselves. Just give me a second.
I'll keep the slides up because I might want to refer back to elements of them. Can you see us as well as the slides? Because the one problem with slides is that you can't see the human talking. Okay, great.
Yeah.
Cheers.
If you can put the links in the chat, Mike, that'd be brilliant.
Sure.
And who you are able to unmute.
Links are clickable. Woohoo! So yeah, you can
Thanks.
navigate the slides for your own benefit, for your own view, and click the links at the end if you need to, and then it won't change the slide for anybody else. Sorry, you go ahead.
Well, thanks both. Very clear presentation, thank you. I apologise for correcting the typo. I think you can go through life spelling it with an R. My correction actually relates to the event that we put on last year and we'll be putting on this year at the Eisteddfodau. Has this already been registered as a limitless event? And if not, is it worth our while making sure that it does fit into the checklist that you provided?
Yeah, a really good question. There are events out there that attract lots of families that will have some of the families there will be from the underrepresented groups that aren't taking physics. Some won't. We're attending these because they're important cultural events like the Highland Games, the Eisteddfodau, and then the National Ploughing Championship in the Republic of Ireland. They're a campaign event because their parents and carers are there. The campaign messages are present, and the team in Wales last year ran limitless campaign activities. And the underrepresented groups will be there in part. These large cultural events have a cross section of the community there. If we run our own events, smaller, much smaller things, workshops, for example, with where we actually go out into specific communities of underrepresented groups, then we have a good chance of getting, 80–90% of them there. If you go, for example, into a centre, this is an example I'm planning to do later in the year, a centre for parents and carers of young people with disabilities, you're going to have nearly 100% will be your target audience. If you go to something like the Eisteddfod, then some of the, so it's that underrepresented groups box in the middle there, which is a kind of maybe, and that's fine, because lots of the people there are in the underrepresented groups, and you will have impact on those people. So yes, the answer is the staff team are already doing it, and they should be giving guidance and training to volunteers who work alongside them at that event on how to talk about the campaign messages. They actually last year at that event championed a technique which works really, really well, which I've been doing at all my events too, which is to have members of the volunteer team or the combined team there on the activity stand, whose job it is just to speak to the parents, and others whose job it is to run activities with the young people. And those who are there just to speak to the parents don't really engage with the young people at all. And while they're standing around watching their young people hopefully getting involved, somebody is talking to them about their attitudes to physics and how they feel about it and all the other campaign messages. They tried that first at the Eisteddfod last year, and it worked so well that we've all been doing it since. So that's an example, a good example of the things we're learning during this process.
Thank you. I was on the stand myself and can certainly confirm what you're saying. I've got some more comments on that, but perhaps I should wait until other people have raised their questions. Sure. But I'll come back if you want me to.
Thanks,
Hugh. Sure. Thanks.
Mikey, Ian's got a question about sort of engaging teachers and pupils rather than parents, and how we push the messages. And I know that's probably quite relevant for many others on the call as well who work directly with teachers. Yeah.
So there is something around teachers speaking to parents. That's one thing. So if the teachers hear the campaign messages, they will speak to parents too. What the campaign's doing with schools is working from the top down. So if you're teaching, if you're speaking to teachers, absolutely get them on board with the campaign, but encourage them to support a culture. And what we're doing is, rather than talking about the specific underrepresented groups with schools and physics, the campaign team working with schools is trying to persuade schools at a governor and management level to adopt whole school equity plans, which are about looking at equalities more broadly, which helps everybody have access to science subjects. And so it's about this whole school equity plan. It's not my team, but I do know broadly what work they're doing. The idea is then that the school will then have this culture, and it will be the pupils will be surrounded by these messages essentially. Careers fairs, yeah, Paul, I'll pick that up, as that's something we are doing in Scotland as well, although there aren't parents and carers there. We absolutely, when parents are present, that counts 100%. And we've got some good resources if anybody would like any for careers fairs, which are, because they're often there without parents, they're not part of the main sort of tranche of campaign resources, but they are limitless branded because they contain the messages: role models, relatable role models, diverse role models, and useful physics. And yeah, if anyone would like access to those resources too, that'd be great. But ideally, yeah, the families, the bit where the parents come along, perfect. That'd be really good. Whereabouts in Leeds is it, Paul? Because I'm from Leeds. Because there's some really rich, diverse, obviously communities in Leeds, and a lot of them do. I mean, if you're looking at sort of Chapeltown, there's obviously, that's one of our target underrepresented groups in the Black Caribbean community. Again, just deprivation and women and girls, they're going to be present at all things. So that's why I think the underrepresented groups, but that's why these big events work, because women and girls are one of the underrepresented groups, and that's 50% of people attending any you know, well, hopefully 50% of people attending any non-science event. You know, if you pop up with a science thing, you've got a good chance of reaching the underrepresented groups.
Thanks, Mikey. And you know, at the beginning we mentioned this is just one of what we hope to be is a program of these sorts of activities. So when we go into a bit more depth around the school's activity, and when we go into depth around the community's activity, we'll do another one of these webinars on an ongoing basis. You know, it's not a here you go, here's some information and run. This is an ongoing program now, and so we're alongside you. Yeah,
absolutely. That's the kind of the narrative around engaging only with school pupils is this idea that it's great and it works, and lots of school pupils in the underrepresented groups probably are very keen on physics already. You know, those kind of interventions with them do work, but then if they go home and their parents go and they talk excitedly about it and their parents go, oh, physics, I don't see the point of that, or I had a negative experience that, or I hated that school, or you know, all the stereotypes that we're looking to bust, you know, that it's insular and not collaborative, that it's not useful in the real world. If the parents then respond with that when they get home, it undoes all the work you do in school. So that's the idea essentially, and it doesn't mean that you do have an impact in schools, absolutely, but this is just another something to do as well, just to make sure that when those newly enthusiastic kids get home, they're not then hitting a barrier. So doing both, I think, is what we're saying. The campaign is obviously not focusing on school pupils because plenty of people doing that, and there's obviously, you know, we're all going to carry on doing that already, or you may in your activities.
Mikey, there's a question from Andy from London and South East. Do you know what? It sounds like a call-in or a phone-in, doesn't it? On a radio station, or I'm going to say this morning, but it's not.
Stay clear of that.
Yeah, stay clear of that. Marvin and Milo is a resource that is well loved by members, by the public. London and South East used Marvin and Milo packs as a vehicle to engage with families.
Mm-hmm.
And I was wanting to hear if there's anything that they can do, as well as, you know, how they can do Marvin and Milo and help, you know.
I think that's great. I mean, doing the activities at home is fantastic, and that's the idea. And if you're working with the right underrepresented groups, then absolutely you're supporting the campaign. The new resource packs like Superheroes Unlimited are good to use because they contain role models, diverse role models in physics, whether they're presented as superheroes like in this year's or in the next summer exhibition coming in the summer, which will have a slightly different approach, but will still contain lots of diverse role models. It just they make it easier to, those activity packs make it easier to segue into thinking about the campaign messages. Marvin and Milo, it's totally possible to do that, and they're amazing, and I love Marvin and Milo because, you know, they're but you then have to basically get the well, how is this physics used bit in as well. And the Superheroes Unlimited pack kind of just make it a little bit easier, but both are great. And you know, it's like I said on that slide there, the format bit is the bit that can be whatever you want, really, including Marvin and Milo. Great, yeah, perfect. So you're doing it all right. The format bit is flexible. The people bit is flexible. It's those three blue blocks. So yeah, absolutely, Marvin and Milo. And there we've just had a big reprint, I think, Paul, if that's right. So there's tons of those packs available if needs be. We've also got tons of the Superheroes Unlimited booklets, and then as soon as the new summer exhibition format is launched in July, then I'm not at liberty to reveal there will be a big reveal of what that'll be, but there'll be a whole new set of activities and packs that you can access and hand out as well, either as well as or instead of Marvin and Milo, or all three, last year's, this year's, and Marvin and Milo together. So
I think one of the things that I'm keen, and again, those of the members who know me would probably say that I would say this. what I'm keen to know is how we can ensure that what members do is celebrated within the IOP. So how do we, if we've got established programs that or established activities within our branch committees or within our regions, within our groups, whatever, how do we ensure that we tick all three of those boxes? Yeah, we talk to parents, we give them material, we talk about campaign messages. How do we ensure that that is celebrated?
Yeah, absolutely. It's about everybody getting together as one, as one movement and doing it and making sure that that's why the form that's there on the last slide is great, and we hadn't devised that when we made the first print of the toolkit booklet, but it's going to be added to the reprint, so you can scan a QR code and just very quickly on your phone input or whatever input what you've done to that, and then we will shout about it, celebrate it. Absolutely. Yeah, just reading Phil's comment. Yeah. Yeah, and your festival was great, Phil, in Stroud. And publicity, do you mean publicity with the underrepresented groups? Because what we're talking about with this resource is going out where they are and running, and the reason why the resource is called Family Events Designed for Impact is because we're asking you to design your events, inviting you, whether these are extra events that you run or whatever, that you're designing them specifically for the underrepresented groups, finding an audience that are captive within that group and designing it for them. And if that is your approach, publicity follows naturally, because you're not throwing it out to everybody. You're speaking to maybe an existing community group, you're speaking to a parents group, you're maybe going through a school to access their parents in a deprived community. So the publicity should be much narrower and should in theory be easier if you've already identified your audience. And we have tons of, we've got staff in all the regions and nations of the UK who can help if you want to find new audiences, and if you want to find new communities to run these events with in the underrepresented groups, we can help.
I think, Mikey, one of the examples we've used, Phil, I'm going to try and make it southwestable, okay? One of the examples we've used is why would a family of underrepresented groups in physics attend an Institute of Physics event? We need to go where they are. So we know that Bristol has got the second biggest Afro-Caribbean carnival in the country in St. Paul's. So could we partner, or could we work with St. Paul's Carnival in July?
Yeah.
And put on an activity for family members of that community,
yeah,
in Bristol, rather than us hiring out school hall on a Saturday,
yeah,
where we're not going to get the impact that we would like, and we're possibly not going to achieve, the goals that would, I suppose, make the time and effort that you put in, make it valuable. Yeah.
Yeah. Or if you have the resources and time and you have enough volunteers, do both, But the campaign impact will come from the former, as Paul said. Yeah, there's to give a Leeds example, that from Paul's perspective, the West Indian Centre in Leeds, in Chapeltown, do all sorts of family workshops during the day, and usually these places are desperate for free activities, essentially, they don't have to pay for, because they're not usually that well funded. So yeah, there's another example there. And then they do the marketing for you. You just have to say this is happening, and they'll shout about it in their networks. And social media does help, but if you're working with an existing group, then they will use their own social media, for example. I hope this is helpful. And you know, we're yeah, Phil, that's true. I guess using Facebook and communities. Yeah, we can help with all that. Absolutely. Yeah. Anything else?
Yeah, I was going to say the questions are dying down, but obviously this is you know, this webinar might close, but the conversation doesn't.
Yeah.
And so obviously, if you do have any questions, you know, do email into public engagement, public.engagement or engagement@iop.org or branches@iop.org, and we will pick it all up and get a response to you as soon as possible.
I'm really happy to take direct emails. I'll pop my email address in there if it's relating to the toolkit resource as well. If it's about your local area, go through branches. But if you want to ask a question about anything I've talked about broadly speaking, drop me an email, absolutely, and we can have a call or an exchange. Sure.
Brilliant.
Yes, Hugh, 100%. Yeah.
Can you expand on the yes?
So finding events great, running your own events better, because they don't have to be big, they can be small, but if you run them yourself, then you're guaranteed to get the right audience because you invite them. In terms of finding events with the underrepresented groups that might be broader but would still have a lot, like 50% should be women and girls, then yeah, absolutely, branches are there to find things in your area. That's 100% something we can do. And then I really see this as being something that we can sort of help with the setup, and then members go off and do it, you know, and we're there to support the whole way through, but we can help set these things up. And while you're doing that, we're doing our own events and activities as well, so that, you know, it all feeds into the same impact. Yeah. And
then obviously there's a question for Paul from Paul. If you can ping over the contact for the West Indian, the community centre in Chapeltown. Yeah. Grand. So what I'm going to invite you to do, if it's all right, as we close, like right at the beginning, I asked you to sort of like say one thing that's going well. To close, just write one thing that you valued, or one thing that it would be better if ... about this session, and do it in the chat. And then I will close this down at 19:55, so in 3 minutes.
Thanks, everybody. I'm again very enthused by the high turnout this evening, and it's been really nice to talk about this with everybody. Yeah. Thanks, Ian. Thanks, Julian. Yeah, Phil, drop me a line anytime. Didn't have time for the video featuring you from the Stroud event, but I might pop that. I might send that around actually as well.
So obviously, you know, we've recorded this this session. Give me your day or two to sort of edit out my silly comments at the beginning, and I will send it. And I'll send it out alongside any of the resources on email to all of you. But again, you know, it's the 7th of June. Many of you have already thanked. I just want to say thank you once again for taking part in this webinar, but also thank you for sort of stepping up to volunteer across the IOP. You know, one of the things that I'm keen to address within the IOP is this sort of what is a volunteer, and my line is volunteer is what you do, not necessarily who you are. And so for me, thank you for your time and for your commitment and for listening, and have a lovely rest of the evening. I'm probably going to go and do bath time. Take good care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thanks all. Speak to you soon.